Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Transforming Your Leadership Style, presented by our Head of Leadership Growth at Watermark Learning, Dr. Jay Pugh. My name is Mariela Salinas, and I'll be assisting in moderating our Q&A session today. We are in Zoom for today's webinar, and we will be sharing a copy of this recording with you in an email after the session. We do encourage participation throughout the webinar, so please use the chat or the Q&A option for our dedicated Q&A after the presentation. Educate 360 is so excited to present this webinar today. So without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Dr. J.
Hey, thank you, Mariella. I appreciate it. Hey, everybody. I'm Dr. Jay Pugh. I'm the head of leadership growth with Educate 360. I've been in this space for almost 9 years now. And so welcome. This is going to be a little bit of a different feel than a traditional webinar. This is going to be a little bit more of a Q&A style feel. The reason why is because there's certain webinars we do that are geared around simply the content only, and hopefully you get some good information, and then we send you on your way. This, though, I want to make sure that your questions are heard. I want to make sure that you all have the time and the approaches to say, you know what, this is something I'm running into from sort of a pain point that I'm running into in higher leadership. And I want you to be able to get those questions out as well. So today, it's a little bit more about you. So I do have a little bit of content I'll share with you to kick off today. And then what I'd like to start getting into is some questions that you may be running into. And this is sort of your free time to be able to ask your questions, to run into the things that you're running into. And let's make this about you and the approach. So welcome. Hope you're ready to have fun with me for the next hour. And I want to kick this off by asking you all a question, and I'd love for you to type this in the chat. So when we're thinking transformation, especially in a fast-moving organization, such as maybe the one you're working on, what does that look like to you? How do you describe transformation from your own definition? Give everybody a few moments. Love this. Stepwise versus incremental change. Very good. I really like that. Yeah, adaptation. I think that's a huge piece of transformation. Julie, love this. Looking, it's almost like not just using, but it's almost going out there to look for what's new, to look for what new techniques and tools are there to help shape better business insights. I love this. Yep, changes, process, technical, mindset shifts. I really like the idea of mindset shifting, Pamela. Really great. Changing behavior. Gabriel, I really like that. There is a true behavior change in the way we start considering things. Change is key. Adaptation, business transformation. Alyssa, I love the way that you say moving away from the current state. I think that's a huge piece, is how do we move away from the current state from where we are? And I love this idea of making positive changes. Resilience, Raymond, I think is a huge piece. There's a sense of resilience that comes into this change. Here's another question that I have for you. And this can be just by hitting the hand raiser. How many of you somewhat feel like you are maybe in firefighter mode day in and day out? Like it's firefighter mode central. It's almost kind of like when do we have the time? And I love this. And this is great. And the reason why I bring this up from the firefighting standpoint is I want us to talk about how we move as a sort of business society from a space of, and that's a huge piece, Julie, is firefighting mode is trying to transform in too many things at the same time, right? It can be information overload for people. So I want us to talk a little bit about what do we do to, and as Christy just took the words out of my mouth, transition to solutions, right? How do we start getting into that space? And so what I want to start with in this case is I want us to talk about the 3 levels of leadership that currently exists in the way that our employees seem to work, and how do we help shape, grow, and move them ultimately to this higher tier of transformational approaches. So, the first level of leadership that I like to get into is what is known as the transaction. The transactional, this is your overseer. I don't want to use the term micromanage because it can look like that at times, but really it's truly a stasis of management, of managing the status quo. We have a job to do. We need to get things done. There's a deadline that needs to be met. But in this case, there's nothing really that is focused on growth or higher objectives. There's nothing really in this space that covers that on a deeper scale. So the goal of this is truly maintenance. The way that I view transaction is that there's a sense of maintenance that things will stay traditionally the same. Can anybody possibly tell me where this might need to be used? With what type of employees might this need to be used? I would agree. Contractors is one. Could be. It could be used in certain ones. Yep. Could be for the less ambitious. The biggest one where we view this more than anything else is in the new. Is in the new. If they are newer employees, they might not have the knowledge, they might not have the education. They like when I mean education, I don't mean the background of education. They might not have the education of the industry or the approach or sort of the way that the organization does things. Newer employees, and yes, potentially less ambitious, more transactional, or if not everybody is going to move up to sort of that level 2, level 3. There are just some employees in this case that they view the world as just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And that's perfectly okay. Yes, Julie, I love the way that said. Yeah, less managed for results, right? That's kind of where we're looking at it from there. Ultimately, and I don't want to be overly pie in the sky about things, but I do believe that there are employees that are looking to be pushed up, right? But there are some that will stay in this area in the transaction. And so the next level that we look at is a very noble and very strong sense of leadership, and I'm a huge fan of it, is the servant leader. And the servant leader is there to grow. It's to grow others. And so when we're talking about growing others, this is where there's a lot more collaboration, there's a lot more delegation, dialogue, there's a lot more personal investment, there's a lot more of giving yourself to the growth of the employee, to giving yourself to the growth of others. And so very, very noble, and typically a strong majority of employees are technically in this pocket. And the reason why is because there are people that truly want to see better versions of themselves in the way that they work. They may not grow ladder wise, but they may grow lattice wise. They may learn other departments or other areas or other strategies or other focuses, but they kind of grow within their role. So there's only one big challenge with being a servant leader. Does anybody know what it is? There's one pain point for a servant leader. Anybody know what it is? Oh, and I don't want to mispronounce Gihan. If I hope that's Gihan. If I please correct me if I'm wrong. Number one is there could be a lack of interest or lack of recognition. You're absolutely right. One of the biggest key words that comes into play is burnout. Servant leaders, sometimes what ends up happening with them is they put so much into everybody else. And Julie, I like the way you said it is, how do we get our stuff up? How can we grow and make change in the organization if we're consistently bending over backwards, helping everybody, helping everybody, helping everybody? where do the ideas for visionary approaches, where do the ideas for challenging things for the greater good come into play? And so what ends up happening is that if we only stay in a servant leadership mode all the time, it can wipe us out. And it can also maybe leave a little bit less room for creation of new ideas. Excellent. So ultimately, and we can't be this for everybody, but this is ultimately the goal, is trying to get to this space of transformational leadership. And transformational leadership is what we were talking about. It's about truly changing, challenging, and really looking as a continuous improvement mindset for the betterment of all. It really is about looking out for the true greater good of what we're doing. It's the true greater good. And so I say this because this is a tough mindset to carry if you're consistently caught in the fires on a daily basis, because this is where true improvement comes into play. This is where game changing comes into play. And so I really want us to start seeing, man, how can I start shifting from moving? If I'm in a transactional, how do I start moving a little bit more to servant? And if I'm in servant, how do I start moving a little bit more to the transformation? So, on a scale, if you will, of sort of this 1 to 3, and it can be, oh, I'm 1.5, or maybe I'm 2.5, or maybe it's, 2.25. I want you to think for a minute with the strongest group of the people that report to you, where do you kind of find yourself? Where do you find yourself? And if I may, I find myself, and I would say, Pamela, I would probably agree that I find myself pretty often around the 2.5, 2 to 2.5 pretty often. That's about where I normally can fall. And the reason why, and I'm going to talk about some things and strategies that I run into on a daily basis in this case. So here's my other questions. And I love this honesty that you all are giving me. So thank you for this. I mean this. Clawing, Julie, the way I love this, and Dominic mentions this, making strides for 3, clawing for time to get the 3. You're absolutely right that it takes truly some time for visionary thinking. It takes time for visionary approaches. And so really love where we're going with this. So what I want to spend a little bit of time with you on, and then we're going to get straight to questions, is we're going to talk about what do we do so that we take a little bit of pressure off of us from being the servant leader over and over again. And the other thing I want to teach you too is how many of your leaders that maybe you're supporting, or if you're not supporting leaders, maybe it is employees, how many do you think are falling into the 1 range or the 1.5 range? How many do you think are falling in that range? And it could be the no range. It could be we're not even getting the job done. Very good. And it could be. And there's still something we can do with that, Julie, that if they are in the retirement sector, there's things that we can do to help reshape what that looks like. Very good. I love this. This is why I want to get you thinking about what this looks like, because I want you to see, like, okay, if I'm leading this, where are they currently sitting? Because the more that you can identify and map these out, the easier this next strategy becomes. So let's dive in. Typically, when you're in a leader 1, if you're in level 1, normally what happens is the leader decides everything. The leader is the one that makes the suggestions. The leader is the one that does everything. It is what the conversation typically looks like is, I need you to get this done, get this done, get this done, and get this done. There's not really room for dialogue. There's not really room. The leader is doing 90% of the talking. There's not a lot of inclusion, and it's really not really a lot of trust with anything. So this is why sometimes how this can be viewed to some is in the micromanagement state. And how many of you show of hands, have had a boss that may have been this way one time or another in your life? There are times where there are times, and I love the 100 there. There are times where there are employees that need this. And like I said, most times newer employees, they need to have that. But what I try to do to get them to grow and to move into level two is a two-step approach. The first thing we need to do is teach. This is where we educate. We educate on process, we educate on industry, we educate on the things that happen. And yes, Dina, I agree that COVID did allow a little bit of that to happen to where there was a little bit of loss of trust. And we teach classes on that about sort of that post COVID transition that occurred. And so in this case, we go from this space of teaching now. The first thing we need to do, the first T we have to follow is the teaching. Because if they can't be taught, then there is no room for them to ask questions. There's no room for them to ask suggestions. There is no room to actually move. So the first thing we need to do is teach. Once that happens, what you'll start to notice in the behavior is that the employee, or in this case, maybe it's a leader, will a mid-level leader or a supervisor or something like that, what they'll do is they'll start making suggestions. Well, what if we do this? And Julie, you're spot on that if you're not teaching, then you're left doing the transactional or you're forcing the transactional. You're absolutely right there. So in this case, the next thing we do is they'll start to open up and they'll start maybe making a suggestion. Well, what if we do this? And what if we maybe consider that? Have we thought about doing this? And this ends up being a critical mistake that some leaders do is they view that as being challenged in the status quo. And so what happens is they squash it. And we don't want to do that. So the way that we continue growth here is we talk out solutions. We make it collaborative in approach. And so if there's a suggestion that is made, and I have some people that are getting a feel for this, and then they ask questions of, well, what if we had designed our curriculum a little bit this way? Or what if we adjusted our operational process to do this? What if we focused on our sales enablement process to do this? And that's where what we need to do is we need to open the door. And I love this idea of question storming. We need to talk this out. We need to allow it to feel like an inclusive dialogue to them. Because if not, what they're going to do is they're going to bounce back. They're going to bounce back to number one, and they're going to go back to, well, they decide everything anyway, so what difference does it make? So we need to talk it out. What happens from here is now there is an element that you're spending more time with them, but they're starting to buy in more. And because of this, they start liking to collaborate with you next. And level two is a true back and forth. It is, well, here's what I'm thinking, and here's what you're thinking. And it becomes this true back and forth dialogue and approach. Ultimately, though, there is this fear a little bit of wanting to pull the trigger on a decision. They're not quite ready to make that decision yet. And how many of you have leaders that definitely sit in the two, or you have people that are sitting in the two? They want to step in, they have good ideas, and they like to collaborate, but they're almost afraid to kind of pull that trigger a little bit on that decision. How many of us have that? You see it routinely. I love this. So what happens here is what you need to do is be more strategic in your questions. We have to start tailoring questions that sort of empower them to ask on a, yeah, and that's where growth struggles come into play. And so what we have to do is start reshaping questions for them. So I have two leaders that I think are very good. And right now where they're at is they love to collaborate, they love ideas, but they're almost like, well, Jay, I was thinking about doing this, and it's like, but I don't know. Well, I could either say and keep them in level two and say, well, here's what I think you should do. Well, in this case, now we're getting back to level two and even 1.5, and that's not where we want to go. So what I do is I ask them questions of, what do you think the benefits of each are? What do you think the benefit of doing A is? What do you think the ROI is of doing B? What do you think comes out of this if that happens? Are there any drawbacks if we miss this? Are there any sort of pitfalls we need to look out for? And by doing this, this gets them to start moving into transformation. This gets them to start seeing the greater vision, the greater picture. And that's where transformation's truly occurring. And the thing is that how many of you, you're definitely in this case as a leader to where you're going, yes, I do ask these questions and I do get them to this. And this is where project managers come into play. I would say program managers, I would say leaders do a really good job of reshifting their questions to do so. And the biggest challenge that comes into play is moving from that 2.5 to 3. And you'll see that what it takes is your time involved with them is actually less. And so to do this, it requires full trust. How many of you can get to the point where if they have their ideas or they have this, that you say, I want you to run with it. I want you to do it. I want you to see what you can do. I want to give you the ball. Anybody feel that pit in their stomach a little bit, that it's like a little bit like, oh, can I really pull an Elsa from Frozen and can I let it go? That's where this comes into play, is that this requires a deeper trust. And so how I view this model is I try to map every one. So we have 16 facilitators on our staff, right? Some are contractor, some are internal. But I try to view everybody on the team and I evaluate, okay, where are they at in this? There's some people that they're level 1, they're just getting onboarded with us, and we need to make sure that they're comfortable in being able to deliver. There's others that, hey, they make suggestions on things, and then it's ultimately a decision where it's like, no, we need to make sure we're staying the course with this. And there's others that are 2.5. And I do have 1 or 2 people that are true 3s. And my goal is to try to see how I can get everybody to get there. And Kevin, you're absolutely right that this journey seems like getting the employee comfortable with increased accountability and ownership. Ultimately, that's the case. It really is, because we talk about, well, how do we get employees more accountable for what they're doing? The fact is that there's a true psychological mindset as to why they don't. There's fear of the unknown. There's fear of trying something different because there's a fear of failure and loss that comes with it. So by taking these 4T approaches, the teach, the talk it out, the tailoring of questions, and then allowing the trust, all of a sudden it follows Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to where now there's this self-actualization that they can really do this. You're absolutely right. So the goal with this is, in the beginning, you're spending a lot more time with them. And then as they're gaining that skill and gaining that approach, you're actually spending less time and providing more trust to them. So I'm going to tell you the final 5 strategies that I will give you that I found to be very beneficial in transformational sort of approaches. Number 1 is, you're right, Kevin, that's the very first thing, is I try to help them anticipate and understand roadblocks before they occur. The other thing that I do in encouraging confidence and being supportive is, I don't go to succeed or fail. I go to what is called succeed or learn. Jane, absolutely it will. Mariella can explain that at the very end, that there will be a recording of this afterward. Succeed or learn mentality is a huge philosophy that I go with. I will say that unless you're a surgeon or a pilot, there is a little room for failure. And I try to find the areas where small failures can occur. And the first thing that happens in the beginning is there's a fear. and there's defense and they get worried and the first thing we say is we're going to put this aside for a minute. First thing I want to know is what you learned. What would you do different? So I'm a huge advocate for succeed or learn mentality. Other people call it failing fast, failing forward. That's it. You've heard some of these phrases. I really like this as succeed or learn mentality. The second thing is that when they're ready, and absolutely, Julie, you have to consider the risk. That's why I say the small failures. I don't want to put them on this giant $6 billion project and then be like, hey, fail fast. It's there, right? And it is, Kevin, it's consistent with no blame culture. So the next thing I do is I give them the ball. I look for opportunities to put the ball in their basket and say, I want you to run with this. Number 3, this one I call being Smokey the Bear. Instead of being a firefighter, I don't just put out fires. I look for ways to build better processes. I look for ways to mitigate risks. Look for ways to build a better process, to build better education, to build better questioning so that we can solve problems better. And so I never give them an answer. I don't give them an answer unless they are in level 1. Then I teach them. Other than that, we're starting to readjust and help them look for what the answer is. Number 4, be agile. I think the agile leader is one of the greatest leaders you can be. It's being flexible about what your approaches look like. And lastly, and this is probably one that I firmly believe in, not just in a leadership philosophy, but in our teaching methodology. I'm a huge fan that anytime you're working with a group of people, I think there's a firm belief in engaging the group, but individualizing with each person. Spending that time in looking at it from a one-on-one perspective when you can. So I engage the group, we transform the mission, but we also take those extra moments just to transform each individual and look at where growth looks like for them. So the next half of this is all for you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave some questions for you. And I want to know, first and foremost with this, are there any sort of things you see in these top 5 that maybe you're like, I need to maybe do a little bit more of number 4, or maybe I need to do a little bit more of number 1, or maybe I need to do a little bit more of number 5? Is there anything that you're looking at to where like, man, I could do a little bit more with one of these? Maybe it's more than one. Oh, excellent. Give them the ball. I like that, Ismail. Any others? I liked it. Kevin, I think this is a huge piece, right? Is prescribed path forward. I think there are many ways to get to a solution. And sometimes we find that when we find success, we really lean into that, and we should. But I love this idea of like the prescription doesn't have to always be the same. I love that. Stephen, I love the idea of number 3. Don't react of slowing your brain down. Matthew, I love that as a first question. If you don't mind, I'm going to come back to that, and that's going to be the first question we're going to take on. I love this. And 1 versus 3, or 1 and 3, I like this. Reducing the fear of the unknown and slowing the brain down. Individualizing the approach, Michael. I like this. Tailoring communication to your audience. I am a firm believer of that, Dominic. And I'm not just saying this from like, oh, just a disc perspective where it's letters and things like that, or from an insights, but I really look for what people's, and I've taught this in other webinars, I look for what people's VIPs are. I really try to identify what their values, their interests, and their preferences are in communication. And I really try to look for what that is so that I can shape and maximize that communication to meet them where they are. Dina, I love the 1 and 5. Really, really great things. So I know we have a couple questions to start, and I think these are great ways to kick this off. And I'm going to go to Mariella, who's our DJ in this. I love this. Mariella, kick us off with some questions that you're seeing, whether it's in the questions panel or from the chat, and let's dive in.
Absolutely, Jay. Yeah, absolutely. So we had a couple questions regarding the presentation. Do you want to jump in on those? I saw a couple coming in that were awesome, are ready to go.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, if we want to start with Matthew's question, I really like it of, do you have suggestions for slowing your brain down to think and consider proactive behavior? Yes, Matthew. I'm going to give two areas here that I think can be very beneficial. And number one, I'm going to use an annotation here that I think could be helpful here. Number one, whenever I talk about being Smokey the Bear, I love to ask 3 questions once a problem is solved. So I say this because what happens where we're in reaction fire, right? We're in reaction mode, reaction mode, reaction mode. What I typically do is ask 3 questions. Number one, what can we do to eliminate this fire from happening again? Now, I'm going to be realistic with you that the chances of this coming out is probably maybe less than 5%. But you have to ask it, because if you do find that one thing you can do to really eliminate a fire, what ends up happening is that it really makes life a lot easier. So the 1A is, what can we do to eliminate the fire from happening again? And I'm going to give you some examples that I ran into, Matthew, with slowing the brain down and doing this. Is I've looked at this from a situation, and I'll give an example. We have amazing salespeople on our staff. I do mean that. But what do you think the likelihood that they know all 70 of our courses inside and out are? That they know all 70. They know the breakdowns, they know the modules, they know the approaches we take with each one. They know them inside out. What do you think the likelihood is of that? If you're taking a guess and saying slim and none and slim already left, you're probably right. So in this case, what I need to do is look at, well, what can we do to eliminate this fire of getting questions over and over and over and over again? What can we do about this? And so what we built to start was, we built a true presentation that really walks them through, that is their guideline moving forward. It is their guideline. It is the foundation, the basis of what they need to know in the leadership space. It's not extensive, but it's the top things that they must know as they're going through this. And then the expectation is, if that's not being followed, then what happens is we need to reinforce going back to that resource as a critical space. So when we have this, it's, well, what can we do to eliminate this fire from happening again? That was something that now, and that's going to take longer, but that fire is eliminated. Many, 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 many of our salespeople truly know what is done with our leadership program. They don't know all the courses. They won't know all the courses, but at least they know the process of what our leadership program entails. So now in looking at this too, it's okay. If we've eliminated that fire, great. But if we can't do this, we need to go to 2A or 2B or not 2B. Is that the question? Actually, sorry, that's my bad Shakespeare joke for the afternoon. So in this case, 2A in this case is looking at this from a space and saying, if we can't eliminate the fire, what can we do to reduce or control the size of the fire? What can we do to reduce or control? And this is process improvement, right? This is looking at true process improvement as a focus. So what I look at is where areas are maybe broken in the system, where things might be off, and where this comes into play is, once again, they don't know all 70 of our courses. And so what happens is I get, Jay, what's the easiest way for our people to get access to our courses? And we have a one-pager that we can send out of the list of our courses that has a one page with all the links that are there. Is that going to eliminate the fire of them ever asking questions about our courses again? No, but is that one piece of the process that can be eliminated? Is that one piece of the process that can be reduced? It is. Another thing we've done with our sales team is looking at, well, what can we do to reduce the controller size of the fire of them reaching out for, when do I reach out for questions? I don't know when to do this. Well, what we look at is, what stage are we at? Are they just discovering things about our program? Then great. We have people on our team that can be able to help with that. Or is it versus, are they ready to build a solution? Because we can tailor and modularize and customize solutions. And if that's the case, great. Well, then what can we do here? And that's where normally I will come in, or one of my directors will come in, and we can be able to help with that. But they know the difference between when to ask for one person and when to ask for another. That part of the fire has been controlled. And 2B is that if it's not process improvement that way, if we know the problem is still going to arise, what I normally get into is, what can we do to extinguish the fire faster next time? And so how I think about that is the likelihood that our salespeople are going to be able to have every solution at the ready, know every possibility of what comes into play, is unfathomable. So what we've built in is an RFI process, which is a request for information. They reach out, we make that dictation of where they're at in the stage, and then what we do is we assign somebody to that to be able to help build that process. What that does is that it streamlines the amount of time that our salespeople are waiting on getting answers. Because that is a big fire, is salespeople want answers, and I don't blame them. So that's what we've done to streamline a process to extinguish that fire faster. If anybody's ever worked in IT, you can never stop a server from going down, but you have a protocol to get that up and running and to have backups at the ready. So that's typically what I do for considering proactive behavior, Matthew. The other thing that I'm going to teach you real quick is I'm going to go to a space of Daniel Kahneman, right? Yeah, thank you, Elisa. Yes, CrowdStrike, right? It took everything down. Flights were down, banks were down. It hit, right? That's a perfect example. Well, there has to be protocols to get this back up quickly. So now I bet you after that's happened, there's a much quicker protocol. So in this case, what I want to teach you, and I want to do a little fun experiment with you all if you're ready for a fun experiment. Ready? Who's ready to play a quick little game with me? This is Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winning laureate in economics. I'm going to ask you 2 questions. There are correct answers to this question, to each of these. Question 1, hands on keyboards. Here we go. Brace yourselves. Question 1. What is 1 plus 1? Go. Gold star. Gold star. Look at us go. We got that one. We're 1 for 1. Love that. Here's question number 2. Ready? Question 2. What's 17 times 24? Go. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So notice that, ready for this? I guarantee you that you know I didn't ask you those questions just to do math today. And I love the answer a lot. I want you to think about what your brain did for question 1 versus question 2. Question 1, your brain already knew it. So your brain just immediately went into reaction mode. That's called system 1 thinking. It's a reaction judgmental brain that moves quickly, because it's your fight or flight responses, it's your physiology in response. So 1 plus 1, you knew it by a set of rules that's where it is. For question 2, what did you actually do? Because we didn't know it was 408 right off the top of our head. So what did we do? What did we do to slow our brain down into system 2 thinking? We reasoned, we went to tools, we calculated, we problem solved, we went to decided we needed a calculator, agreed. And so what ended up happening is you shifted your brain from searching for an answer fast to going to a process. And Julie, even in that case, the process could be collaboration. The process could be going to a calculator, going to a tool, going to a resource, going to ideas. And that's what I want you to start solving is if you're trying to slow your brain down, Matthew, one of the greatest pieces of advice is don't search for an answer. Look to build the process. Slow down to build the process. Excellent job. I love this. So, question. Another question that we had here that I really like is what if somebody doesn't want the ball? What if somebody doesn't want the ball? They want to just be spoon fed information. What I really try to do here, Pat, in this case, is I really try to identify their why. I really try to look at it from their lens and I look at it as would they say that about themselves, first and foremost? Would they say, hey, I just want to be spoon-fed information? If that answer is yes, then that gives me just a key indication that, you know what, in this case, they're going to be a level one employee. They're just coming in to do their job. That's all they're going to do. And that's fine. That's fine. But we'll find that it's fewer and further in between than we think. And so what I really try to look for, right? What we try to look for is in this case of saying, how do we really look for the why? Is it because maybe in the past they've had a boss that shot them down on every idea? So why would I open up now? Maybe it's trauma driven. Maybe it's fear driven. So we have to really look for what the reason is as to why they may not want the ball. We have to look for what it is underneath of that. And that's why I'm saying the individualizing your approach is so critical here to really look at it from that lens. That's such a great question. And Mariella, there's been so much good participation that if you see a question that I missed, please let me know. I'm just going down the list myself, but if you see one, talk to me.
Absolutely. We actually had one come in from Julie earlier when we were discussing the three levels of leadership
Mhm.
and the ranges for them. What if we have no range?
Oh, if we have no range. So if there is zero range here, what I normally try to find is where specifically are gaps existing? Is it in the space of skill? Is it in the space of knowledge? Is it in the space of I don't want to say character, personality? Is it a meshing? Is it a belief system? I really need to look for where the individual gap is. That's what I would really get into. And to tie that to Julie's second question of how about the opposite question of when somebody wants the ball but doesn't have the trust that they're ready for the ball, then what we need to do, Julie, is go back and tailor the questions. We need to tailor the questions back to them to find what those missing pieces are. What aren't they seeing? What areas are missing in their growth? What skills are not quite there yet in the identification? And we have to get them to see it. We have to ask them the questions, not in a rhetorical sense, but almost in a way that gets them to see it themselves. And I will tell you that I have two of the best directors on the planet. I don't care what anybody says. And if you've ever had a webinar with them, Dr. Susan Hydorn and and Andrea Brockmeyer are two of the best in the game. They have years of experience. They are strong in their endeavors and they are very good at what they do. Do they have areas to grow? They do. And so even still, I tailor questions for them. And we're getting them ready for the ball in certain areas. And they're doing great at it. But once again, there is that succeed or learn mentality as well. Awesome. Other questions going through. Mariella, hit me.
All right. I think I'm skimming through. I think we've got them all, but I actually really loved this piece of this one comment that Christy threw in that I think it's
Yeah.
so poignant. We have a unique situation that allows our employees allow and then in quotes demands our employees to constantly problem solve. They see a problem, test the change, and implement. And by the next morning, all the sites have implemented that change, and they do this independently of leadership's input.
What is huge about this is truly a level 3 that starts to happen. And the reason why now is you now have a synergy of inputs that's occurring. They are testing the solution. They're taking autonomy in this approach. And there is this sense of trust that if they fail, it's okay. They're going to fail fast. They're going to move forward and they're going to go for that. And Christy, that to me is where transformation occurs. I fully support and applaud that approach. I really do. Excellent. Oh, I do see a question from Steven. It says a solution my top management uses for 3 is to boomerang the problem back to the originator of what's to be done as opposed to prescribing the exact answer. I love a good boomerang approach. I do, Steven. I think it's an amazing sort of philosophy to go in and say, do you know what? I could really give you the answer. And we use this old phrasing of, give a person a fish versus teaching them to fish. That is truly the boomerang method, is a teaching of fishing. It really is. I'm going to teach you how to fish, but then in teaching, I'm also going to talk it out, and then we're going to tailor, and then we're going to put the trust in you and see what you do. So I love that philosophy. And we're down to close to about, I'd say, give or take maybe 10 to 12 minutes. I want to see other questions we have in this space. Billy, trust is absolutely fundamental. The piece that goes behind the trust, though, there's so much work that gets put into trust. And that's where, if they don't feel like they're taught, they're not going to be able to talk it out. If they don't talk it out, then they're not going to be able to understand what questions they need to be looking for. And if they don't really get those questions, then they don't know what to trust. So you're right. Oh, Ashley. And Sylvia, I love this. Socialize the idea to get group buy-in. Absolutely. I love that's the level 2 that gets into level 3 is moving that approach. And so what happens if trust is lost? This is a very big piece here. I love this, Ashley, of when trust is lost, what do we actually do? What I do is what I call cure. I call it cure. This is a very good, and from my own resource, I have a book called Conquering the Seven C's, and part of what happens is one of the C's is connection, which really gets into the space of trust. And I always get the question of, well, what happens if trust is lost? The first thing we have to do is create a space. And what I mean create a space, we have to create a space for real dialogue to occur. There has to be a safe space. There has to be this level of allowing meaningful action to occur. That also means that forgiveness might have to be ready, that we have to be open to it. That's the first piece, is creation. So I use the acronym CURE. Create, uncover is number 2. Uncover is your ability to really look for what the root cause of a real problem is. Because when we look at why people have lost trust, what we do is we leave it on the surface and we don't dig into what actually happened underneath to really see what happened underneath. We don't really take that moment. So I really need to uncover the deeper feel of it. The next one, I get into reconsideration. The R is reconsideration. And what that means is, well, how can I look at this from their lens? How can I reconsider this from their lens on what intentions were versus what actually happened? The last space is expression. I want to make sure that before we leave a really important dialogue or set of dialogues, that we express what our next moves are so that we can work towards restoring and building trust. So it's creation of space, uncovering of real roots, it's reconsidering different lenses, and then expressing at a way forward that we can move together. That's cure. It takes time, it takes work, and it does take a sense of will. And if those aren't there, then it's a lot harder to do that. I hope that helps, Ashley, because that's a key point that I think needs to be addressed.
Awesome. We had some fantastic questions come in, a couple from the chat and one from our Q&A. I'll go ahead and hit that Q&A one. Can you please recommend any books on transformational leaderships besides slash in addition to the training that we offer?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Dr. Monica Sharma's Radical Transformation. That's one I'm reading currently, and I'm just pretty much wrapped up with it. Dr. Monica Sharma, I think, is a world leader, not just in transformation, but change agency. I'm a huge fan of that one. That would be one that I would, I mean, and that's a free endorsement. But she doesn't know me, but I think the world of her. So I would go there. I think that's a huge resource.
Excellent. We had two more come in. One here from Dominic. What are some effective ways to motivate a team member to take the ball and run with it when they are content to just be told what to do?
I had this as a backup slide, Dominic, and I'm really glad that you mentioned this, because what I typically try to do is what's called plant leadership, to where you act a little bit more as a nerd, like you really try to look at every person on your team as a plant and sort of what things do they need in order to grow, right? That's what I mean by individualizing the approach, is looking for things to say, you know what do you need to be able to do the things that you're doing? And so I have some people that are cacti, and I'll even admit it, I myself am a cacti. I'm pretty independent. I'm self sufficient. I don't need very much oversight at all. I want you to give me the ball. I want you to give me the ball, and I want you to be able to just say, hey, let me run. But not everybody's that way. Some people are more orchids. They need a little bit more careful attention. They need a little bit more gardening. They need a little bit more care. They need to know you genuinely care about them in order to move. And if they don't think you care about them as people, they won't move. The other thing that comes into play is, with the rainforests, they need opportunity for knowledge and growth. They really need the water, right? They need that. Deciduous trees grow in sort of forestries, and they need sort of the ability to change and the ability to explore and the ability to grow and not grow over each other, but to really sort of grow together. And some need to move at their own pace. They need to know the process. They don't like being rushed, so they might need a process instead. So I really try to look at them almost as if they were plants themselves, and kind of ask the question, do they need soil? Do they need water? Do they need space? Do they need room to grow? Do they need care? What is it that they really, really need here? And that's how I use motivation to end up meeting them where they are.
Fantastic info. Awesome. We had another one come in. How do you relate with upper management or directors that are more in level 2.5 and not ready to move to level 3?
Oh, Michael, good one here. Yeah, I think if that would be the mystery, I would probably get paid a lot more. No. So I think this is an amazing question. The biggest thing that I can say is, relating with upper management that are more in level 2.5 is a fear of letting go. I think normally what happens in this case is they have been known as being highly skilled for so long that there is a fear of irrelevance, that if everybody's at a level 3, then what am I here for? And that's a huge fear that is a tough one to shake. And so what I try to remember is that I try to go to sports on this when I talk to people about this. There's two things that have a coach that goes into the Hall of Fame. There's two major factors. Number one is wins, championships, wins, right? Results. That's a big thing. The second one, believe it or not, is their coaching tree. their coaching tree is a huge consideration factor. And sort of who did they mold into the next set of leaders? And so I try to remind people that are 2.5 that it's no longer about the contribution of your skills as much as it is the contributions of you molding the next wave of leaders. And that's not easy, but that's a dialogue I really try to have with people that are in that 2.5 space. And I myself struggle with it, Michael. I know there's days that I'm in the 2.5. I hope that helps.
Excellent. Yeah, absolutely. I think that this slide as a whole is really
Yeah.
resonating with our audience. So
Yeah.
I'm so
John
glad.
just asked, can you be more than one plant, Mariella? I think you can be in certain situations. Yeah, I do. I think we have our characteristics deep down. I would say most days I'm a cactus. But there are some things, and I'll be honest with you, we're working on a larger scope of services with what Watermark can provide that's outside of just the scope of amazing workshops and facilitation and coaching. And so to me, I'm moving from a cactus a little bit into a deciduous tree to where there is a little bit more collaboration. I need a little bit more collaboration and adjustment and a little bit exploration in what we're doing. So yeah, I think we can shift in certain situations. But I think keeping this at the forefront on your mind is really important. And I would say, John, it isn't better to be on the left. I don't think it is. I think it is important for us to look at different ways that we need certain things at certain times. I think it's much more where it's best is to truly be considerate in what people need in those moments. That true individualized awareness. That's why my life's mission in leadership is number 5. I will always engage the group, but I'm going to individualize my approach every way, every time. I think we're coming up to the top of the hour. I know people are starting to have to run. I really hope the Q&A portion of this was really helpful as well. I hope you got a lot out of this. What I do want to mention is, folks, if you are interested in more of this, we do workshops. We do facilitation. We have a course dedicated to becoming a transformational leader. We really try to help leaders be even better leaders to shape tomorrow. That's a big mission of ours. So if we can help you do that in any way, please let us know. I'm going to pass that mic over to our DJ. Go for it.
Absolutely. I saw a couple of questions, people wondering if they are going to get the slides. We are absolutely going to be sending over a recording of this session in case you missed out on any part. And if you needed a little bit more info, please do not be afraid to visit us at watermarklearning.com or that little link I dropped in the chat. Alrighty, audience, thank you so much for your engagement today. And thank you so much, Dr. J, for all this fantastic info.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and hope to see you all again sometime.
Absolutely. Alrighty. Bye for now, everyone. We'll see you all hopefully very soon in the classroom.